Fatima, so your life story really is a powerful example of resilience. If we go back to the beginning, you was abandoned as a baby, um, and let's be real, you was left for dead. It was only because neighbours found you. I heard you crying in a house on your own. You went and spent 14 years in a care home, minimal contact with your biological parents, and those times were traumatic as well. Just talk to me about your any memories of that time, really, for yourself.
So I always say, James, who is Fatima Whitbread? And I'm still trying to work that one out myself, okay? So let's just say a survivor for now. And as you rightly said, I was abandoned as a baby, and some would say left to die in a flat in London. And a neighbour heard the baby crying, hadn't seen anybody coming or going in a couple of days. So she called the police, who then came, banged the door down, and rescued the baby, which was myself. And then, of course, I spent the next several months in hospital recovering from malnutrition and nappy rash. Pleased to say I got over that nappy rash. Now, during that 7 months, James, I was made a ward of court by Hackney Borough Council, which saw me in the care system for the next 14 years of my life. My first children's home was in Hertfordshire in where there was 25 other children from 0 to 5, which saw me there with 25 other children. And I can always remember playing in the front room, which faced the car park. And anybody that came in the car park, I'd always say, "Is that my mummy coming to collect me?" Which was very true of all children, that lived there. Nothing was ever back in the 60s, being a baby, a child in the care system in the 60s. The care system was really non-existent with inclusion and fulfilling the young children's needs. So nothing was explained to me of why I was there and what was happening to me in terms of where my mummy and daddy were, and if I had any brothers or sisters. And I had no birthday cards to indicate there was anybody out there, no visits. And ultimately, I was like a lot of children traumatized, from a very young age through neglect, abandonment, and the fact that nobody actually explained anything to me. So I was trapped up here. And this is what happens to a lot of children when they're in the care system. You know, um, they get, trapped within their minds thinking that it's something that they did. And it's really hard for them to deal with that trauma, of neglect and abandonment. So 14 years is a long time, and I can always remember, hold on a minute, my little boy wants to play fetch. Freddie, stop it. I take that away from him. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously, I can remember one particular moment when I got up and there was everything was like routine. When you got 25 children, I mean, there were only students in the village in Hoddesdon in Ware. There were 16-year-olds looking after these young children. And of course, so routine was really important. And I can always remember we were gathered together to go downstairs for breakfast. And sometimes, emotionally, you're not really up to it, but you couldn't really express what it was that was happening, in terms of where's mummy and where's that special person, that you want to feel loved by. And I, particularly at this moment in time, was not happy about going down for breakfast. That was the last thing on my mind. I was just very tearful. And I remember being called to by the matron to come down the stairs because I was, stamping my feet and saying I didn't want to go downstairs. And the matron sort of called me down and said, "Look," she said, "come on into my office." And I remember that the place where we lived was a big old house, and it was quite austere. But when I went into the office where there was a room we weren't allowed into, there was beautifully laid carpet with a glowing fireplace going. And I remember she said, "Come on now, tell me what's wrong. Would you like a biscuit?" And I sort of perked up. Yeah, I would love a biscuit, like all kids. And with that, obviously, it was very perfunctional. The house matron just said, "Now run along and behave yourself." And I can remember the next morning she called to me. She said, "Fatima," she said, "9 o'clock tomorrow morning downstairs," she said, "you're going to be picked up by biological mum with your social worker to go and live in a new children's home where your half brother and sister were. And of course, that was quite a shock to me, that suddenly had this information that I did have a mother who was coming to collect me. And who was this mother? So it was quite worrying, but to think that I was going to leave the only children's home that I knew and all these children were my family. And then who was this person that called themselves my mum? I mean, in 5 years, I never had any visits. As I said, I didn't even think that this person would exist, and to have brothers and sisters as well. Well, that's quite strange. Half brothers and sisters. I mean, who were these people as well?
What was your emotion like when you found out you had half siblings?
Well, I mean, as a 5-year-old, it's very hard to emotionally process that. It takes time to think about. So I didn't sleep very well, and naturally, I was a bit concerned about leaving the only place I ever knew, where the children I knew they were my family. So yeah, waiting downstairs at 9 o'clock in the morning. Of course, I mean, I watched that front door very, studiously, and I could see this pink cerise movement, and the doorbell rang, and the matron answered the door, and a big burly lady with black curly hair came in with a. I noticed she had a gold tooth at the front, but never once did she engage with me. And the lady behind her that came in, slim, linear, mousy coloured hair with a duffel coat, she sort of burst in with larger than life, smiling at me and engaging. And I thought, oh, that must be my mummy, because like a lot of young children that obviously have lacked the love and security of what needs to most children have in conventional families. That person, I felt secure, and I thought that must be my mummy because that's what I wanted, but it wasn't. So yeah, but
Of course, it's well documented the trauma that you suffered as a young child. I want to talk about one of the positives from your time in care. Auntie Ray, she was known as a
my
really,
bright shining star,
I
actually.
suppose, a ray of sunshine during a really dark time of your life. Just talk to me about what she was like and what impact she had on you.
So like, it's always difficult for young kids. They always need a good role model, one person in their life where they can relate to and feel secure with. And that one person can be life changing for children in care. And that person for me was Auntie Ray. I mean, I used to call her the tickle monster because I knew Auntie Ray. She was a 42-hour lady. She'd come in and help get us kids up. She'd just, I'd hide under the bed sheets and wait for Auntie Ray to come and get me up. And she'd tickle me. And my day didn't feel like it had started till Auntie Ray tickled me and got me out of bed. She just got us kids. We just felt safe with Auntie Ray. We knew she'd held us emotionally and gave us the space we needed to grow. And Auntie Ray, when I used to run up the staircase, and if I knew she was coming on duty, I'd look out the window, the port window on the staircase, and I'd follow her and listen to her clip clopping up and down the road. And I could see that she lived on the corner end of the road. So this one particular day, I was 10 years old. I went out and collected all the daffodils around the children's home in People's Gardens, naughty girl. And I walked down to Auntie Ray's and I knocked on the door and I hid the flowers behind my back. And when Auntie Ray opened the door, I presented her with the daffodils and I said, "Will you be my mummy?" So she looked at me. She said, "Oh, Fat." She said, "Let's talk about this." She said, "Come round the back." And I thought, oh, way up, I'm going to be in trouble now for picking all the daffodils. But Auntie Ray sat me in her kitchen and she said to me, Fat, she said, "I can't just be your mum." She said, "I've got to be mum to all those children." She said, "But here's the thing." She said, "I'm not always there and you are." She said, "So why don't you be their mum when I'm not there?" And what that did for me, it gave me a sense of responsibility and purpose that I thought about this and I thought, yeah, I could do that. Which made me a bit unpopular in the children's home with the house parents because there were many injusts of which I used to question and call out on behalf of all the children, really, and myself. And I used to do things like read bedtime stories to the kids who were rocking themselves to sleep and crying. And when they woke up having nightmares, I'd get them up and I'd help them if they wet the bed to change the bed. We'd play trampolines on the bed, bring a sense of fun to the room, and draw matchstick men on the steamed up windows, that kind of thing. We also had a baby in our room, which was the house parents' responsibility, but they never got up during the night. So I would have to take the baby to bed and comfort the baby, which was most nights. And what that did is in giving, you receive. So in giving them the love and fulfillment that they needed emotionally, it also, I received it in return. The second thing what it did for me is it swaveled the lens. So I didn't grow up feeling victimized in my circumstances. I had a sense of purpose and responsibility to be mum and the carer. And in doing that, it changed my whole perspective of what was going on in my life. And when you look at the care system as we do today, there's 110,000 children in the care system. Now, my first 14 years, like most of those children in care, was blighted with physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. And these children often go unprotected. And we've got to do more to support these young children. Uh, a third of all local authorities are seeing a weekly increase of kids coming into the care system. And at 18, these young people are pushed out independent living, of which most of them only get one point of contact only twice, and that's it, and only £2,000. Most of them have huge challenges because they've not been taught how to budget and they fall into crisis. And I've always said, what do you want? A fence at the top of that cliff or an ambulance at the bottom? We've got to do more to help support and give these young people a chance of survival. A third of them end up homeless within the first 2 years of going independent living. And huge challenges such as having to navigate rent, bills, employment, no safety net under them, no bank of mum and dad. And this is, a real difficult time for our young care leavers that are pushed out. They're voiceless, homeless, kind of made it, independent living at 18. Ask yourself, if you have a family, would you do that to your 18-year-old? The answer is no, isn't it? So we need to be more aspirational for these young people. And part of what I do now is a child from the care system becoming world champion and coming back in a full circle now and launching my own campaign called Fatima's UK campaign, which is to help improve the life outcomes for children and young people by bringing together collaboration and partnerships in shared good practice and knowledge with various stakeholders and representatives from the care system. In April last year, we staged a 2-day summit at the Guildhall, which was a historic moment because we brought together for the very first time the four nations. As I said, representatives from right across the care system. We had 110 contributors, 900 stakeholders in that 2 days, from county lines, probation, housing, homelessness, virtual heads of schools, the power of arts, sports and technology programs, and much more. And what we do now, building on that success, is using a networking innovation, uh, and we are putting together action hubs, which we are currently got around about 12 at various different levels at the moment, which help to skill our young people up. So, for instance, financial awareness is at top of our priority list at Fatima's UK campaign because many of these young people go out independent living at 18, do not know how to budget. They don't know how to survive and circumnavigate through rent and employment, and often fall into crisis. So we want to avoid that situation for them where they become homeless. We have mental health therapies. 1 week's notice, they can have 12 weeks virtual therapy. We've got a company that will support them for that, free therapy. We've got hospitality and construction companies that are coming in to help skill up our young people in apprenticeships. Another area that we work in is local authority wraparound programs, which is of vital importance because these young people need that support when they are in the care system from 16 years going into independent living at 18. We should be thinking about how do we prepare these young people to live that sustainable independent life. And part of what we're doing is to work with local authorities, of which we have a number of sign-ups now from Hackney Borough Council, Brentwood Council, and many more. So even when the government evolves, this is a sustainable program. It's not a project, it's a sustainable program that can continue to roll out even when government changes its structures. So yeah, I mean, we're in the midst of putting a charter together now, much like the services that provide for young people when they come out of the forces, to give them a startup package and know where they're going, and also aspire to different grades like bronze, silver, gold standards. So they're always going to be supported, and that's the least we can do. As a corporate parent, we should be thinking, what is necessary to continue with the duty of care for these young people, and not just casting them out alone and then they end up homeless. We all have that moral and ethical responsibility too. When I look to the society, don't just think it's government's responsibility, it's all our responsibility. And we need to ask ourselves, what more is it that we can do to support our young people in our communities? We have a thing called now social environmental governance, and that's so important that with local companies in communities that we start to build those working relationships with our communities and to improve and help society as a whole, because ultimately these children are our future generation, and what and how we shape them will decide what society ends up. And I've always said we need to help them, put them on an unstoppable human path to reaching their goals and living their dreams so that they can live that sustainable life when they go independent living. And one day when they have a family of their own, they'll break that cycle, of which is a win-win for everybody. They become, integrated in society properly. And it makes for happier futures for them and better communities. And we all have a role to play in that.
No, absolutely. I will come on to that shortly as well, Fatima. But obviously, I think for you, from where you are, you've lived it, you've experienced that, and that's why you're in a really good position to have this campaign that you're doing as well. And I think as well, you're very much a care system success story. You know,
Mm.
sport saved you is your words you said in many interviews previously. Take it back to your earliest memory of playing sports, and did you notice
Yeah.
at those times were you at your happiest?
So for me, sport was my savior. I always found it very difficult, like lots of children in care, to study and focus on study. Emotionally, I was in a lot of turmoil. Trauma hits us in many different ways, neglect and abandonment. For all of us, it's very real. You don't have to be in care there's no hierarchy where trauma is concerned, just by being a human being. But it's how we deal with that. And I can talk about more about the healing work, which is what's important, which we all have a responsibility to do once we reach a certain age. But certainly at that start time in my life, it was unheard of. In the 60s, nobody ever talked about mental health or mindfulness. And these are the things that we stumbled upon and learned as we went along. And for me, I found my addiction to sport was fabulous. It gave me a sense of freedom, get away from the children's home and the trauma that I was suffering, or a daily constant reminder of that, of children coming and going in the care system. You were constantly surrounded by it. So it's really hard to get your head above that parapet. But for me, sport gave me that sense of freedom, which I was able to forget about most things when I went and participated with playing even football with the boys in the park or climbing the trees. Back then, we were called tomboys. And when I went to school, I loved to show how good I was at sport. That was my way of becoming, accepted and included in the group with my peers, with respect, and also teachers. And I found that. in doing sport, I also learned a lot of life skills. I was given the responsibility as team captain in most of the different sports that I played, as netball, hockey, learning how to work with organize time events for team practice, dealing with young people, and their different emotional needs as well. And, just by, you know, the very mere fact that I was playing sport that I loved, I learned a lot about myself and who I was. And it was through a netball match that actually through sport, that I met the love of the Whitbreads, and was fostered at the age of 14. So that was an amazing fait accompli. I mean, I remember the match very well. The netball match that we played was for the cup match, and I said to Auntie Ray, "Oh, Auntie," I said, "if we win this match, we're going to get a medal, and I'd love you to have it," because Auntie Ray was always the person I wanted as a mum. She was very special to me, as she was to all the children, and she was a great role model for all of us. Auntie Ray said to me, in fact, she said, "Now listen here, young lady." She said, "You haven't won that match yet, so don't be putting any medals around your neck before you've won them. Just enjoy what you're doing." And I remembered, when as an Olympic athlete, when I went into the Olympic Stadium, those very words would ring out in my ears, and I would never put a medal around my neck before I'd actually won it, because there was always two games going on in the stadium, two events. One was the actual event itself, and the other was obviously the psychological game of applying yourself. But this particular netball match was for the League Cup, and it was going 11-11, 12-11, 12 all. And of course, I was raising my voice trying to encourage the team. And the whistle went, and the umpire said, "Young lady, keep that noise down, otherwise you'll be off." Yeah, I mean, I started questioning that, come on, it was going 12 all, 13-12. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, nowadays, they would call us motivators, but back then they used to call us a pain in the rear end, yeah, for making such a noise on the court. But in fact, it was me motivating my team. So yeah, interesting. We won in the end, which was great. And so Auntie Ray got her medal. And I remember it was the end of the netball season, the beginning of the athletic season. And I said to my friend Alma, who lived in the children's home around the corner, "Alma," I said, "why don't we go to the local athletic club and see what there is there?" So we both walked. I think it was about 5 mile walk from where we lived in the children's home. We probably got the bus money, but pocketed it and maybe got sweets or something silly like Woodbine cigarettes, which kids did back in those days. And when we got to the track, Alma saw the sprinters and off she went. And I saw this very tall, good-looking blonde guy throwing what looked like a spear. And he looked a little bit like Brad Pitt. And I thought, "Oh, I'll go over there." He looks nice. And as I approached the runway, I saw there was a javelin on the runway there. And I went to pick it up, and he said, "No, no," he said, "you can't do that." And I said, "Why not?" Questioning it, as like all kids that are quite feisty, that live in the care system, fighting for your own rights all the time. That's how you are. So he turned to the shot put coach, Jack Grinny, and he said, "Jack, can you look after Fatima?" And Jack said to me, he said, "Young lady," he said, "come over to the stand," he said, "and wait there. The javelin coach will be over soon," he said, "and then I'll introduce you." So as I sat in the stand waiting, toe tapping, this mini pulled up into the car park, and Jack sort of looked at me. He said, "Oh, here comes the javelin coach now." And I was sitting there watching the mini, and then the door opened, and then this figure started walking across the infield, and I went, "A double take. That's that same woman on the netball court that threatened to send me off. What are the chances?" So with that, obviously, when she reached the stand, Jack went to introduce us, and before he could get my name out, she said, "Yes, I know who you are." She said, "You're Fatima." She said, "Well, let me tell you, young lady, any of that cheek you showed on the netball court, there'll be no throwing any javelins here." And of course, I put my cupped my hands in prayer, and I said, "I promise I'll behave." And of course, as the weeks went by, she was starting to say, "You've got a bit of talent, young lady." She said, "Why don't you ask your mum and dad to come up and we can talk talk about getting you some javelin and some kit and putting you into a competition program. So I sort of just nodded my head. And in a few weeks, she said to Jack, "Has Fatima got a hearing problem?" So Jack said, "No, why is that?" "Well, every time I ask her about mum and dad coming up, oh, he said, don't you know she's one of those kids from the children's homes?" And so with that, Mrs. Whitbread the following week came up. She said, "Well, she said, I've had a young girl that's retired." She said, "Here's a pair of boots. They're probably two sizes too big. Stuff them with paper." And she gave me them. "And here's a javelin." And of course, I was quite excited about this because, kids in the home rarely got anything given to them. Everything you had was communal clothing. You could never really get attached to anything because you'd see another child wearing it. And I was quite keen to get back to the children's home because in the summer the house parents left to go on holiday, and we had German students that would come. Most of the short stay children that were in there during the summer season would go home with their parents. Only likes of us that were long stay. And I said to Alma, my friend, "Come on, let's get on the bus today." Well, I mean, it wouldn't happen today, would it? Standing at the stop with my javelin and the bus doors opened and the driver was sort of shaking his head no. And I pointed the javelin to him and I nodded yes. And he said, "Go on, get on the back," he said, "and behave." So when I got back to the children's home, I said, "Ingrid, come out in the garden. Let me show you how I throw this javelin when I'm up at the track." And of course, we went out into the garden, and it took me a couple of throws to get it to the end of the garden, into the vegetable patch. And when I pulled out the javelin, I had to sort of discard the potato off the end of it. And then I sort of walked forward a couple of steps. So, "Ingrid, move out of the way. I'm going to give it a big throw this time." Of course, I didn't. It went smash through the French windows. Oh, Ingrid was like, "Oh, my dear." She said, "You're going to be in such trouble." And she was holding her head in her hands. And I said, "Oh, what's new? I'm always in trouble." I mean, I was always questioning everything. When it was wrong, I would question it. So I said, "I'll tell you what, Ingrid, stick it with sellotape." And of course, Ingrid said, "You'll still know." And I said, "Yeah, never mind." And anyway, when they got back, the house parents, I got a month's ban, which was quite hard, really, because a month's ban after school activities, and I couldn't do any of them. I mean, so none of my sports was possible. And often when Auntie Ray was not on duty, I'd stop in and on the way home and call in and see her as well. But so I couldn't do any of that. And then eventually what happened was there's only so much tinkering around you can do in the garden. I mean, it was fixing punches on the bikes and playing with the kids. Um, when I went to school one day, one of the girls from the opposite netball team got a message back through the team saying, "Mrs. Whitbread thinks you're bunked off with the javelin and the boots and you've sold them. You're not interested." And I thought, I can't have that. So 2 o'clock one morning, I got up when everyone was silently asleep in the home, and I went downstairs into the front room, and there was this French bureau, and I opened it and took out what, in my ignorance, an envelope, an airmail envelope, and I started writing on this envelope, "Dear Mrs. Whitbread, sorry I can't come to the track. Only I smashed a window with a javelin, and I've got a month's ban. But one day I want to be the best javelin thrower in the world." And I sort of stuck it back down and put Mrs. Whitbread, St. Chad's School. That's as much as I knew. So I hid it under my arm next morning on the way out the door. And then I posted it on the way to school. And I kind of just waited. And a few days went by, which felt like weeks. And I thought she couldn't have got it. And then one day I heard the phone ringing when I was in the garden. So I pressed my ear to the glass window and I heard the house auntie saying, "No, no, she can't come. She's smashed the French windows and uncle won't let her out." So Mrs. Whitbread must have been quite persistent because within a week I was back at the track throwing the javelin again. And it was from there really that she asked me, would I like to come and meet the family, have tea? And I thought, that's nice. Yeah. So I went and had tea with her family, and she introduced me to Mr. Whitbread, who was a lovely chap. And also, they had two sons, Greg, who was 4, and Kirk, who was 2. And as you can imagine, me being growing up with kids, I was very good with children. Still am, actually. I love children. They're the innocent ones. They never ask to be born, do they? And we should do the best by them. And when, I met them, we had great fun, piggybacks and all sorts of things. And Mrs. Whitbread, on the way back, when she took me back after tea, she said, well, she said, how would you like to come and stay for a couple of weeks during the summer season? And I kind of looked at her and I thought, I'm not sure. But she said, what's the problem? She said, and when I got back to the children's home, Auntie Ray said, I know exactly what the problem is. She said, look, she said, your responsibility to those children is admirable, she said, as being their mum. But she said, I'll look after them. She said, you go and have a couple of weeks with the Whitbread, she said, and stop worrying about the children. And that was exactly what I did. I went and had 2 weeks, and I always wanted to know what it was like to live in, a conventional home, family's home. And yeah, it was great. I mean, I was under no illusions. They have ups and downs like all of us. And at the end of that 2 weeks, Greg, the 4-year-old, he said to his mum, Mum, he said, do we have to take Fatima back to the shop? And it was quite funny, really. And on the way back to the children's home, Mrs. Whitbread said, well, she said, we were wondering, she said, whether or not you would like to come and be a part of our family. She said, become a Whitbread. And I sort of looked and I thought, are you for real? Because, I mean, it was quite a big, milestone. Sadly being told that I could become a part of the family was quite a scary moment, because what if it wasn't to work, or whether it didn't happen, I'd feel let down again. And I would always be like a lot of children in care. You build up these walls of security around you because you're constantly feeling let down or being let down. And you didn't dare trust, that things could happen, good things could happen for you. And of course, when I got back to the children's home, the house auntie said, "Oh, so you're leaving us, are you?" She said, "What are you going to tell Auntie Ray then?" And I knew Auntie Ray was coming in on duty that afternoon. I could hear her clip clopping up the back door, the pathway coming in the back door. And before I could say anything, she came in the back door, and the house auntie said, "Well, go on then, go on, tell Auntie Ray." Now, it's really difficult for me because Auntie Ray was, the person I always loved and wanted as a mum. And of course, I'd grown very fond of Mrs. Whitbread too. And so I didn't know how to deal with this situation. But true to Auntie Ray turned to me. She said, Fat, she said, are you going to become a Whitbread? She said, that's all I can offer you, she said, and I would take that with both hands if I was you. And she put her arms around me, gave me a big hug. And that kind of gave me permission to let go of what I knew of the care system and become, a Whitbread. It was an amazing fate, really, that happened. And, my mum Margaret, I mean, mum and daughter, athlete and coach, I mean, we just went from strength to strength as athlete and coach. My mum said, look, you don't have to be an athlete. She said, there's a lot of hard work involved. And I said, no, that's who I am. That's who that's not my dream. As an 11-year-old in the children's home, when I was constantly being told by the house parents, you'll never amount to anything. Care leaver's age was 16. And she said, oh, we can't wait to get rid of you, to get you up to the boarding schools there, she said. And then in the 60s and 70s, it was all about marijuana and prostitution. And she told me I would end up on the streets as a junkie and a prostitute, which scared the living daylights out of me. So for me, that was a very worrying time on a daily basis from 11 years old, thinking, what was I going to do? Um, and then, of course, I watched the Olympics. It was on as an 11-year-old on the TV. It came on, and I saw Mary Peters from Northern Ireland. She was competing in the pentathlon, which is known as the heptathlon now. And she won the Munich Olympics, and it inspired me to become what I believed I could do, is become an independent self-financing person if I become a sports champion, and this is something that I can do. It planted the seed and it gave me hope that there was something out there for me, and I lived by that code. And of course, I become very good at sports. I was a county netball player. I was a county hockey player, youngest ever at 13 for the first 11. I also got at 16 offered a Whiteman Cup place in golf, 60,000 a year, but I didn't take it because I was just out of the care system, and I wanted to be a javelin thrower and be with my mum. I didn't want to go traveling around the world as a golfer. I also got a scholarship from UCLA offered to me by the Winston Churchill Fellow. Um, but again, I was too young. When I say too young, 16, just coming out of care at 14, I was only just getting used to being what it's like in a family. So I didn't want to leave the family unit. It was a scary time. We didn't have modern technologies we do today. You could FaceTime or WhatsApp somebody now and see them across the other side of the world. Back then in the 70s, once you left, that was it, wasn't it? You never had the opportunity of seeing your loved one or speaking to them at all like they do now. So yeah, naturally, I mean, I wanted to continue with my sport as an athlete, and Mum and I worked exceptionally hard. We had to sort of look at the different technologies to what it was in my mum's day, back in the day when she was competing, to what it was in the modern time now. And we learnt together, to work with people like Jeff Capes, who helped us with the strength side, Willie Banks, who was a triple jumper world champion for the USA. Used to study all their techniques and apply my disciplines in how to do plyometric work, strength work, and sprinting also with Verona Elder, who was the British 800-meter champion at the time. I sprang used to belong to the sprint club with Verona and Huey Elder. And I also used to do a lot of running with Daley Thompson, and Daley used to be coached by Mum for the javelin, for the decathlon. It was a real learning curve. And even when I look back today, I say the biggest single thing that I will say is not just the end destination of winning gold medals. It was actually the journey of self-growth that was the biggest single thing that I can honestly look back and say that was my success, and I've been able to turn that around and use that as a platform for the better of the cause of children in the care system, which is what I do through my campaign, Fatima's UK campaign. So I use my lived experience and my Olympic platform to get that message out there to try and improve the outcomes for children in the care system, and also bring together collaboration and partnerships where in past years people worked in silos and there was no joined up thinking. But thankfully, through the Fatima's UK campaign, we have now, for the first time ever, brought the four nations together in shared good practice knowledge. Secondly, we have a directorate which never existed, which if you go on fatimascampaign.com, you'll see it. And all the on the videos on the breakout rooms and panels that we had at the conference, the summit, is on our website. You'll be able to see that too. And we're mighty proud to say that we've joined up thinking now. We've eradicated silos, and also amplified the voice of children and young people where decision makers are, stakeholders, ministers, and yeah, we're mighty proud of the success that we're having. And what we do at this current moment in time is, as I say, build happier futures for our young people and future generations beyond us.
No, absolutely. Just the last couple of questions about the sports side of things. You mentioned it's really interesting. You said that you had an addiction with sport. Addiction is
Yes,
a word that a lot of people will look
so
at
straight. Yeah.
with negative side of things.
Mm,
Obviously, it's also a positive, and for you, it really was a positive side of things to be addicted to sport and give
mm.
yourself that. You mentioned hope. It gave you a focus and escape from reality at times as well. Just talk to me about how much sport meant to you. I suppose at all different parts of your life.
when you look with young people in the care system, if I look back now with some young people that I grew up with, sadly, their addictions, and we don't have to look too far, society in itself reflects it. There's always addictions. People are addicted to shopping, they can be addicted to alcohol, they can be addicted to drugs, social drugs. And I turned my pain into power through sport. That was my addiction, and I used that to leverage it to help, others, to understand that you can succeed, and there's no reason why you can't succeed. Your start doesn't have to define your ending. And that's what I talk about when I say addiction. So my healthy addiction to sport was my savior, and which helped me to become world champion. My drive and passion, which was second to none, which I have now brought to my charity, Fatima's UK campaign. And when you look over the last 2 years, what we've achieved is short of a miracle. And when you look at some people that have been in the care system, working in the care system, there's a lot of tireless good work out there. And But unfortunately, because they work in their silos, they're not sharing that good practice and knowledge. And the care system is quite broken. So ultimately, it's further damaging our young people, and it's not serving the purpose it should. So that's why I decided to launch the campaign. And with that passion and drive that I had as an athlete, I've now turned it around for the good cause of the campaign, the Fatima's UK campaign. And if there's anybody out there listening, ask yourself, what more can you do to help Fatima's UK campaign? What more can you do to help any child within your community? And if you do want to help, go online, fatimascampaign.com, and get in touch, or simply help donate and support us to put these young people through our power of sport, arts, or technology programs. For every child that we help, it's £1,000 to engage them in a year-long program. That helps them to engage, keep them out of harm's way, which often they get preyed upon or groomed, targeted because they're vulnerable. It helps to give them the opportunity of working in a safe place, a safe haven where they can connect with people within their environment, within their community, so they can build a social network. They may well learn to have a role model in their life that can help circumnavigate them. It only takes one person to change that child's life. And here's the power of sport, arts, and technology that can do that. We've got case studies to prove it, how it saves these young people from falling on the wrong side of the law. Too many of our young people have been fouled by the care system. I recently went to Downview Prison for Women and spoke to a number of the women that our care system have found. Now their children are in care. So it's so important that we work collaboratively together to build better futures. And why wouldn't you want to put these young people on an unstoppable human path to reaching their goals and living their dreams? Because as I said, one day they'll have a family, and you want them to be able to break that cycle so history doesn't repeat itself.
No, definitely. And your story really is a inspiring, special, motivating story. As I said at the start of the call, it's almost like your story is there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is hope, as you said earlier. There is a way out. There is, your beginning doesn't determine your ending, like you say as well.
Yeah,
Um,
but so look, I mean, for instance, this is my bright shining star. This is a young Fatima. This book I wrote a year ago. This is young Fatima, and this is Auntie Ray, and she is my bright shining star. So the book's named after her. And this book is 3 to a 12-year-old. And the illustrations are done by Rianne Wright. It's actually a brilliant book about a young Fatima in the care system. It highlights the plight of what it's like for a child in the care system, and it also educates young children to understand that all children have families. And the other side of that is we have a shortage of 11,000 foster carers. And the idea really is, I mean, we're looking to ask you out there, are you able to open your hearts and your homes to fostering a child? You know, to give them that love and security that every child has a right and a safe, place to live. For me, I mean, the book is based on, reality of a life story of a child that grew up in the care system, found a bright shining star, and what the difference that made to that child, and what a difference you can make. So it's so important, I think, that we share our emotional intelligence, because it's empowering, and there are a lot of us out there, and I would love anybody who's listening would come and join forces with me, to help, to give these young children the opportunity. Why not? If you don't can't foster, you could at least be the none of them, they don't have aunties and uncles, then come along and be, a surrogate aunt and uncle. There are programs that you can get involved with. Step up at a weekend, take a child to a football match, or to at home to have dinner with. Of course, there's a diligence that they have to go through, but that's a small price to pay for a wonderful opportunity of building, a relationship with a child that needs it, and it may well do you good to have that as well in your life. Be an aunt or an uncle, be a surrogate mum or dad. You don't have to have it for 24/7, but you can be on part-time, and you can make give hope to a young child and make a difference to that young child's life. We all need to think about this, what difference we can make.
Fatima, as I mentioned, inspirational figure, Olympic medalist, world record holder, world champion in your field. What advice would you go back and give your younger self or anyone in the care system now?
Well, I always look in the mirror and see that young child. I mean, it doesn't matter how old I get. Um, I spoke earlier about doing the healing work, and many people that I speak to, I've always said it's not about getting over it. My primary care years, like all children that grew up in care, their primary care years will always stay with you. It's how you deal with it, because uh, future events will trigger off past events trauma. If you haven't dealt with it properly, in healing, then those triggers are very alarming, and they come on a daily basis sometimes, and you've got to know how to deal with that. So the healing work is really important. And whenever I look in the mirror, I always say, I've got you. I'm going to look after you, and I'll walk forward several paces and look back, and I'll say, see, I told you. uh, you know, um, that's really important, that you embrace the fact that, yes, you did have that traumatic start to life, but it doesn't mean it defines you at the end of your life. You know, Happiness, what is happiness? Happiness is a byproduct of experiences that you have in life. And when the more uncomfortable and the more difficult sometimes those experiences, the bigger the growth. And I think that's the most important thing. The single most important thing that I would say to anybody is embrace and do the healing work. You don't have to go to a therapist and pay extraordinary amounts of money, extortionate amounts of money. Nowadays, modern technology has it that you can go online, you can listen to podcasts, emotional nuances out there, and understanding and sharing, how one can, listen to other people's experiences, all these things, or journal. I like to journal. And the other thing I always say is that it's about the three M's: movement, mindset, and mindfulness. If you get up in the morning and you think, I can't cope, I've got angst, anguish, anxiousness, or you're frozen in that state of fear, as soon as you start moving and you get up and get out, maybe take the dog for a walk. If you haven't got a dog, ask a friend. If you haven't got a friend, and go for a walk in the park amongst nature. You start to get what they call a feel-good fact, the hormones that start to kick in, the oxytocin, that they're the feel-good factors that you have, which is so important. And then, so that's movement. And Then you become mindful about your surroundings and what you're doing. The mindfulness is really important. Being against nature, I think, is always a wonderful thing. It gives you what I call a free flow state of mind, so that you can open yourself up a bit more to each day. And mindset's key, because 95% mindset is everything that you do. So, if you tell yourself you're not going to be able to do it, the chances are you won't. So the three M's, practice those on a daily basis. They're very easy to do. And look back over the last year and think, what is it? Three things that I could change about my diet, my health, or what it is that I do, in my routines, and try and replace them with three other things that will serve you better purpose. Whether it is going out on a daily uh, walk with your friend, or it is to do something with a close family friend or relative, or it is to go to bed a bit earlier and not eat all so much sugar or junk. These things have a role that they play equally in the way you feel. So, taking responsibility is really important for all of us, and not just for children that grow up in care. We can all do with a bit more of a deeper dive to find out ourselves what it is that we can do to have a healthier, happier life and feel more content.
Finally, last one from me, Fatima. So we spoke about pivotal figures in your life, Auntie Ray, your mum, Margaret Whitbread.
Yeah.
What message do you want to put out to all the people who are those figures in people's lives?
Well, as I said earlier, role models are key. Giving a child hope is so important. It changes everything, the whole perspective of the way they look in life. Having that one person in your life can make a whole world of difference. For me, that was Auntie Ray and my mum. But equally, what happened as time evolved, and I look back as well, is that, one of the most important things for me was to be able to become a good mum, because I never had that as a child. And for me to have had my son Ryan and do the best I can in being a mum to him was life changing, was so important to me, And when I talked to him, he says, "Mum," he said, I had a really good childhood. I mean, that was an amazing thing for me to be able to do, and breaking that cycle where I didn't have it, being able to give it. And then you can only do that if you work on things. You really have to think, what is it do I want out of life? And how best can I serve myself in my soul, and in order to do that. And I think it's all about self-growth and taking those difficult times and turning them into a power, and I now use that for the cause of trying to help others through my Fatima's UK campaign. And one thing I'll leave with you, a thought that I'll leave with you, and I've always said, what is the brilliance behind my mantra? And strength, kindness, and love is what completes my world. But the question is not who's going to let me, but who's going to stop me. And if you've got a good mindset like that, then you will forge forward, and rarely will you get held back. That's what life's about. It's embracing all differences in all people, but helping yourself to help others, and in giving you receive. I just love the fact that having come through the care system as a baby, abandoned as a baby, and growing up in the care system, then finding the love of the Whitbreads and Auntie Ray, becoming world champion or record holder in the women's javelin, and then coming back in a full circle. Now back in the care system through my campaign, as I said, Fatima's UK campaign, and become, as I said earlier, who is Fatima Whitbread, a survivor. Yeah, I'm now changing the care system, and I'm determined to bring that fundamental change and do the best I can to help others. So yeah, I am extremely driven and proud of what I'm achieving through the Fatima's UK campaign, and also my vice chair Gina Gardner. She's my equal. She's 20 years a head teacher, and she we've met through doing a keynote speak at Westminster Abbey, and yeah, long story that one. But Gina came aboard when I asked her would she help me, and we've not stopped since, and you watch that space, as they say. It's and if you want to help us, go online, fatimascampaign.com, reach out, or give generously if you've got finance and you can help these you to make a difference to these young people's lives. Why wouldn't you? There's one more thing I would like to say to you, James.
Go
I'm
ahead.
going off to the Arctic, 2nd of February. I'm doing the Arctic crossing, so I'm going to the northern part of the Arctic, and I'll be trekking across the North Pole, and for a week. It's temperatures between -20, -40, and it's to bring awareness and raise funds for children in the care system through Fatima's UK campaign. So here's something that you can perhaps help me with, get that message out there. Anybody out there listening, please donate and give generously. I've got a Just Giving page, and yeah, that will be helpful.
No, absolutely. Well, best of luck with that. Best of luck with the campaign, Fatima. You say who is Fatima Whitbread? You say a survivor. Some will say an Olympian. Some will say a champion. Some will say a role model. I say just a legend. Fatima,
Thank
thank you very much for your time.
thank you, James. All the best.
Thank
Happy
you.
New Year to everyone.